Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Wildfire Watch. Tonight we're going to explore what happened in Los Angeles and how the lessons learned from this event and other recent wildfires can help us to better prepare for wildfires here in Marin. I'm Rich Shortall with Fire Safe Marin. Shortly we'll hear from our local wildfire experts and respond to your questions, but first let's watch a short video of scenes from the very tragic fire in Los Angeles.
We're getting a 70 knot wind speed. We're going to have to shut down water dropping operations. Also, you can cancel it to additional copters.
On behalf of all of us here tonight and in Marin, I'd like to express our shared concern and compassion for the people in Los Angeles and all those affected by this tragic event. To join in our conversation tonight, please post your questions in the Q&A function within Zoom. We'll try to get as many questions answered live as we can. Any questions we don't get to will be answered later on our website. Please look for those along with a recording of tonight's show at firesafemarin.org in the Fire Safe Marin YouTube channel. So let's begin our conversation by introducing our guests. To my right here, I have Jason Weber, Chief of the Marin County Fire Department. Next to him is Stephen Torrance, the Director of our Office of Emergency Management. Then we have Mark Brown, the Executive Officer of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, or Marin Wildfire as we call it now. And then last we have Rick Navarro, Chief of the Mill Valley Police Department. I want to welcome all of you and thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it. The first question I have is, let's talk a little bit about the terrain and the conditions to try to find out what's similar between Los Angeles and here. Mark, can you tell us a little bit, what do you think about that?
Well, both Marin and LA are coastal counties, right? So we're up against the ocean, and we both experience the same type of wind event. They call them the Santa Ana winds. We call them the Diablo winds. Our building stock age of our homes are very similar, and how they're arranged is very similar. We have steep hills, canyons, narrow roads higher up on the hills, and houses are a little bit more separated higher on the hills. But as we start getting lower in the hills, we start getting the houses closer together. Very similar to LA.
Yeah. How about the vegetation?
So LA County is more brush, and we have more grass and timber, but the fire behavior is going to be very similar based on the wind that we see with those wind events.
Yeah. And I guess it's those valleys and those winds and all that are channeling the fires and whatnot. Yeah. So one of the things that could be a little bit confusing sometimes, I think, for residents is the difference between a wildfire, a quote, WUI fire, and an urban conflagration. Chief, want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that fire behaving on the landscape as it did in Southern California or in Paradise or Lahaina when you have these wind events and that are fueling really embers, millions of embers at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, it doesn't matter what we call it, the outcomes are the same. And I think that no matter where you live, and even if you thought of yourself as completely safe because you live in a somewhat urban area, that's a myth. That legend needs to be put to bed. Everyone in California or a Mediterranean climate where we see drying landscape and hot, dry winds is susceptible to a significant fire. And the devastation that we've now seen, on an island, in Paradise up in Northern California, the North Bay fires that were not that long ago, and of course most recently in Los Angeles.
Understood. Can we compare the firefighting resources available in Los Angeles versus Marin?
Well, I think, yeah. Los Angeles is a large urban area with an enormous amount of firefighting resources available to them. And no matter how many resources you have when you're dealing with that kind of an event with wind that's driving that and then multiple fires in the same regional area, it would draw down, the greatest area. And Los Angeles is probably, has more resources per capita, certainly than other parts of California, and if not across the country and the world. We're here in Marin, we're in the North Bay, we are connected to our partners. We have a very robust mutual aid system. Any day of the week we have 35 engines available to us and 80,000 homes or structures. So you can see how quickly you can be outnumbered. We do upstaff during wind events, so we pre-position resources with help funding from the state of California as well as locally. But I think what we're going to talk about tonight is how important it is to create a resilient community. And you need to give us a fighting chance, and that means defensible space and home hardening, because our engines can be much more effective under those circumstances when we have multiple structures to defend. If we don't have a conflagration where house after house is on fire, because we're just outgunned at that point.
Yeah, I think sort of building on that, unfortunately, I think one of the sources of misinformation that's out there has to do with water supply. So we hear about hydrants ran out of water. Of course, we've got hundreds of fire engines out there working, drawing water. Can you explain a little bit about what the water supply issues are there and maybe contrast it to Marin?
Well, I think none of our water systems are designed to have 10,000 homes wiped out with open butts pouring water out. Many of the water systems are refilled overnight, so water's pumped from a lower level to tanks at a higher level, and that's a lot of the case in Marin because of our geography. They refill at night and in preparation for a lot of showers in the morning for irrigation to come on. They're not designed to be wiped out, 10,000 open butts. We have a lot of water tenders available to us through the mutual aid system and the agencies in Marin. We have the ability to pump, whether it be water out of reservoirs or the bay. But in a tactic of firefighting tactics associated with a wildland urban interface fire, you have 500 gallons on your tank and you need to make that last. And going back to emphasizing having homes defendable, easily to extinguish, we can make that 500 gallons on our engines go a long way if the house is defendable.
And Rich, if I can add, Marin Water and North Marin Water are very proactive. Under red flag days, they will make sure that all the tanks are topped off before the wind event occurs. But for me, instead of focusing on water systems failing, why don't we focus on keeping homes from igniting in the first place? Because that's what's making the water systems fail. So if we can keep the homes from igniting, then we're going to save the water system.
That sounds like a good plan. And I do believe Marin, for a long time, financed by the voters, has a program in place for the wind water to actually expand the water capacity with new pipes and whatnot.
Yeah, go ahead, Jace.
Yeah, in partnership with the fire chiefs, Marin Municipal Water created the Fire Flow, and it was the replacement of many of the mains that were antiquated or near end of life, and we've made significant progress. That funding expires in just a few years in 2029, so we're going to have to go back and ask the Marin voters, is this something they're still interested in continuing? Of course, we recommend the replacement of these things and making them as resilient, because it's not just a wildland fire, it's an earthquake, it's the other disasters we can experience that can compromise our water system. Obviously, we want that to be intact.
Great that we're being proactive here on that. I think that's a real plus. Sort of related to the water supply, I put this one to you, Mark. is there's a lot of talk, well, if you just put sprinklers on the homes, that's going to save all these problems.
Yeah, we get hit up about external sprinklers for homes quite a bit, and my experience is water that's applied without purpose is usually water that's wasted. Under these wind conditions, the sprinklers really aren't going to be able to deliver the water exactly where we need it, number one. Number two, the water isn't successful just by itself. We need firefighters actually working the material where the water is going, and we need, when the ember lands, we need the water to go to where the ember is. With the sprinklers in the wind, we're not guaranteed that's going to happen. And then finally, we're talking about water systems collapsing. One of those sprinkler systems is about 12 to 18,000 gallons per 24 hours. So if you have every house using 12 to 18,000 for every 24 hours, think about how fast a water system will fail.
I think related to that, we'll be talking about them more, but there's a lot of better strategies for protecting homes coming up here. So Stephen, one of the things, of course, that people are always concerned about is alert and warning. Can you talk about anything that you know about the experience down there and maybe contrast it to the system we have here in Marin?
Yeah, so alert and warning is definitely something that is top of mind for everyone. Right now, we know that whether it's in Los Angeles County, within the cities that are within the counties of Los Angeles, there's a lot of agencies that have robust systems. But the core thing is making sure that people are signed up. And so across the entire state of California, we are always championing signing up for alert and warning systems throughout the state because we want to make sure that people can get the message. You've seen throughout the state that wireless emergency alerts go out. We want to be able to localize those messages. And so throughout the entire state, my colleagues and I are always talking about how do we get more people in. In Marin County, we only have 35% of our community members opted into the system, and we want that number significantly higher. Being able to get people a text message, a phone call, whether it's on a landline or a cell phone, whether they're in the county or outside the county, we want to make sure that no matter where you are, that those messages are getting to you. Of course, there's always areas for improvement with emergency alerting. When we start looking at wireless emergency alerts, whether it's a power failure, whether it's just the cell towers not being available. Within Marin, we have a couple of patches or places that we know where cell coverage is not the best. And so what are those redundancies? And so we really want to make sure that people know if you're in an area that has poor cell phone coverage or no cell phone coverage, what are those redundancies, like signing up for making sure that your system is on Wi-Fi so we can get a text message through to you via Wi-Fi. There are always things that we can do to improve the systems, working with our software vendors, but when we start looking at the things that we can learn from Los Angeles County, we always point to making sure that people are signed up. That's how we're going to have the most effective alerting system, but that's how we can get messages to people regardless of where they are.
Great.
Rich, can I just add to that really quick? We also have in Southern Marin the LRAD system, the long-range acoustical devices, and that is either a siren or a message that's going to be put out to the community. We also, in law enforcement, we have a high-low siren. That is a European siren, and if you hear the high-low, we tell everyone it's time to go. So that is something that every law enforcement officer's vehicle in Marin County has, and I believe some of the firefighter engines in Marin County. So if you hear the high-low, it's time to go.
I won't ask you to make that high-low sound.
Thank you very much. My friend the fire chief has asked me to do that recently.
I think the good news from both of you, and this really should make people feel comfortable, is that we have so many systems and they're redundant. But it doesn't do a lot of good if we're not taking advantage of this as residents. So kind of a pitch here is please sign up for Alert and Marin. We're going to revisit this later.
Well, and Rich, if I could add, the Board of Supervisors made a significant investment in the Office of Emergency Management, adding staffing, adding a 24-hour duty officer. Our county to the north, Sonoma, did something similar after the events up there. But the partnership we have with law enforcement, we are tied to the hip during these incidents. So there's a law enforcement representative and a fire representative that are literally sitting next to each other to make sure that there's clear messaging going to our residents, visitors, whomever it is, through the Office of Emergency Management. And I think that's something important to take note of, and it works really well. And you see us here sitting together as a team today. That's the same response we're going to have in the field.
Okay. So I think we should have a high level of confidence that the alert and warnings are going to get out, but then people have to take action. So typically what people are concerned about, of course, is evacuation. So Rick, I know that Mill Valley has been very proactive in this. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Anything you might know about what happened in Los Angeles, and maybe contrast that with what's happening here in Marin?
Yeah, a couple of things, and Mark Brown spoke about this. The terrain is actually very similar, and up in the canyon area, we have very narrow, windy roads, and so when a community member wants to evacuate from their neighborhood, that's a very narrow path, and then we're also trying to get public safety members up into the threat zone to fight the fires. So we need to make sure that people take one car per family, and then also reach out to their neighbors to see if they have any special needs, if they can help them evacuate. But the less vehicles on the roadway is critical. We have done some studies through Google and Ladris AI, and what we're finding out that the less vehicles on the roadway is going to save us critical time to get people out of the threat zone. In Mill Valley, we've also done a couple of things. As Chief Weber spoke, we pre-position trailers for evacuations. On red flag days, we put those trailers out, and there are cones and A-frame signage that we will set up so that we have contraflow, so that we're opening up those roadways. A lot of our communities in Mill Valley have 1, 2, maybe 3 pathways to get to the major thoroughfare to get out of the threat zone. And so it's critical for us in Mill Valley that we have the contraflow in place, and we practice that with our public safety partners, law, fire, and Department of Public Works, so that we have that muscle memory with our community members, and we are really working side by side, as Chief Weber said, in the command center and making those critical decisions to get people out of the threat zone.
So we work collaboratively here at Marin with the different agencies. We've pre-planned with this. We rehearse it frequently. It's a pretty good system out there.
Rich, can I talk about the need for early evacuation? Please evacuate when you get the evacuation order. And if you have access and functional needs, don't necessarily wait for the fire to occur. If you're in a really high fire danger area and we know that we have a particularly strong event coming, maybe you go visit a family friend or a family member outside of the high impact area. And then remember, as the chief mentioned, this is a community event, and if you know any of your neighbors that have access and functional needs, help them. But in the LA fires, we were hearing radio calls 8 hours into the fire where firefighters are having to rescue people who did not evacuate. We need people to leave early, and that's going to allow us to be able to get resources into the fire area quicker.
Good strategy. Be the first one out. You're not going to be dealing with the traffic, right?
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Rick, how many people roughly do you think were evacuated in LA?
So that's a great question. There's a couple 100,000 people that were evacuated from LA. Think about that in context to Marin County. Our population in Marin County is 260,000 roughly. That would be almost the entire county evacuating on our roadways. So as Mark spoke, early evacuation, have that communication, know your plan, talk with your family members, have a plan in place, and be prepared. If it's a red flag day, fill up your car with gas, have your batteries charged, have a go bag, have a plan, take your medication with you, think about your pets, and also communicate where are we going to reunify our family members. Those are all big things that really need to be in the back of your mind because a disaster can strike at any time.
I think when you look at those numbers and you think of other large evacuations that have happened in California, I think people should rest assured that pretty much everybody safely evacuates. It works better if you're signed up for the alerts. It works better if you're the first one out. Help your neighbors. Don't take as many cars. But the fact is, hundreds of thousands of people could be safely evacuated, and we saw that in Los Angeles. Sadly, some people died, but not in the evacuations. People stayed back in their homes. So beyond the cooperation that we have here and some of this planning, Mark, I think Marin is also doing some further planning for evacuation. You want to talk about that?
Well, we have with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, we have a tremendous amount of money going towards wildfire mitigations. One of them is for evacuation route clearing. And the idea is that, okay, no community has been designed for every car to hit the road at once, right? So we know that there's going to be traffic jams. And so we want the roadways to be safe under fire conditions if you are in your car. And the message is please stay in your car. You'd be surprised to find out how resilient cars are. We also have, as the chief mentioned, Ladris AI, which is allowing us to do some traffic modeling. And through the traffic modeling, we can start creating plans like Mill Valley has created for the rest of our communities that include contraflow and being able to get people out in the most efficient area. And then there is the design and implementation of temporary fire refuge areas. And so that would be areas where we could put residents temporarily in an area within the impact area of the fire and keep them safe in that area until the fire passes, and then we have them take the rest of the way out.
Right. So Rick, you've been doing evacuation drills in Mill Valley for a long time. How has the planning and thinking about it evolved over time? And particularly if you could bring into play what Mark was talking about the areas of temporary refuge.
Yeah, so temporary refuge areas are really critical to us when we're running evacuations to get people off the roadway and to get people from the canyon down into the flat zones that are free from fire and into an area that is open and get those vehicles off the roadway. So in Mill Valley, we have our temporary refuge areas such as blacktops on school grounds and shopping centers. But we've also identified two very key critical areas. One is our Bayfront Park. That can take 1,000 cars. And then also at Tamalpais High School on the ball fields, that could take roughly 1,500 cars. That's a lot of vehicles that we can get off the roadway. They can sit for a few hours in a very safe area, or maybe even longer in a very safe area. And then we can also bring resources to them. So community refuge areas, temporary refuge areas are a key piece to our evacuation planning.
Yeah, good strategy. So Stephen, does your office kind of assist with that in terms of guiding people to some of these areas and whatnot?
So we work very directly with all of the agencies within Marin County. Chief Navarro mentioned, we work with them on the evacuation planning. So utilizing the Ladris AI tool, understanding how long it takes to evacuate certain areas, but also when we're going out and doing evacuation drills with the community, we are working in lockstep with these agencies. And so we want to figure out how we can actually expedite alert and warning when we go through and understand how long it takes people to evacuate from their homes. Also, what are the things that we can do on the software side to make sure that we can get out alert and warnings to the members of the community faster, but also working with the field responders to say if they're going to use high-lows, making sure that we have unified messaging despite what patch or badge that we have. We want to make sure that if you hear a high-low or if you hear an LRAD or you get that text message, that all of those things that say the same thing, but also tell you where to go. And so that's where we want to have a unified messaging, but we have to work with our partner agencies first to make sure that we're working to serve the community in the best way.
So sign up so that you're getting these messages, right?
That is correct.
You'll get the direction and the guidance that we all need to do this safely. So let's talk about wildfire prevention. When I say wildfire prevention, can we accept that we're going to continue to have wildfires?
Absolutely.
All right, so we're not like stopping them from happening. That's just not realistic. We need to adapt and thrive in that environment. So what are some of the, Mark, I'll start with you on this one. What are some of the government agencies in Marin County doing for helping to make us safer in wildfires?
Well, I think our number one thing is our home evaluation program. Through Marin Wildfire, we have approximately $4.1 million that's going to back out to our member agencies to support roughly 55 to 60 home evaluators. And we're doing close to 32,000 inspections a year. That's a pace that we've kept for about 3 or 4 years now. And so with those inspections, many of them, we're having the opportunity to have one-on-one engagement with our residents where they're walking around their property with the inspector, and that is our best public education right there. So we don't always have the opportunity to have the inspection with our residents, but if they aren't there, then we leave a door hanger on their door where they can log into the report, they can see what we were able to see, and then ask for a full inspection for their full property. And I think I know the only way that we're going to be successful in becoming a fire adapted community is if our residents take action along with all the work that our public safety agencies have been doing.
So is it fair to say that a large percentage of Marin residents have actually received this report?
We have reached approximately 80% of the residential structures in Marin. We have hit 100% of the residential structures that are in the wildland urban interface. And many of the structures have been inspected multiple times since Marin Wildfire has come about.
So somewhat like signing up for Alert Marin, you also have to open the report, right?
You absolutely have to open a report. And we find that people who aren't opening the report aren't taking action, whereas people who have opened the report within 15 days, that 60% of those people take some form of action. Now, is it everything we're asking them to do? No. But at least it's some form of action, and we ask that they just have a plan to pick off the items that are on that report.
So you've got a personal guide for this.
Well, I think the key here is sometimes it can feel overwhelming what's being requested. And the intent is not punitive. We really want people to look at the report and start to digest it. There are simple things they can do that have huge impact. Immediately around the house, that first 5 feet is so important, and then work your way out from there. But opening the report is the first step, and we're here to help you. We don't want this to be punitive. We want to see action. When we start to see action on a community level, we're going to see a change in the landscape, that we're now becoming a fire-adapted community, meaning fire can hit our community and it's not going to create the devastation like we've seen in these other communities. That's what we're trying to achieve. But first step is open it. Second step is, it's like eating an elephant. You got to take one bite, and eventually you'll get there, and we want to help you do that.
Yeah. We'll come back to this a little bit more, but in the meantime, kind of on the larger level, we have a lot of open space in Marin County. You can see the picture of Mount Tam behind us and whatnot, which is great. That's why we all love to live here. What are some of the larger projects, for example, shaded fuel breaks? What's that all about?
So that's really, fire was a natural part of the ecosystem here for many years, interrupted by the settlement and homes being built, and all of a sudden, a fire policy that says all fire has to be extinguished. And the reason for that was we didn't want people's houses to burn. Well, that created a really unnatural level of vegetation across the western United States. Really, this isn't unique to Marin. And the challenges that presents now is the field load is enormous, and so we're seeing fire behave on the landscape with these kind of winds like we hadn't previously, and it's really 100 years of fire suppression. So we have several choices of things we can do to reduce that. One of them is vegetation management, and so you talk about a shaded field break. That's reducing the dead and down material, targeting non-native invasives to create a more natural state. Fire will behave less extreme on that. It may not end up in the canopy and running. It'll go to the ground, where firefighting aircraft, bulldozers, and crews can be more effective. Prescribed fire, I think we'll talk a little bit about that, is another tool where we're starting to reduce that same fuel load of dead and down material. It's more challenging in the urban interface because you can't just light a fire and let it go. So sometimes it's techniques of the vegetation management crews come in, they'll do piles, then we'll burn in wetter weather. So there's a host of tools available to us, and we're making significant progress across the county, but we have to be doing more of it. And it's because we're using that to replace what was natural fire across the landscape for long before we all arrived.
Yeah. Can you describe, Mark, some of the bigger shaded fuel break type projects that are Marin Wildfire's funding?
Yeah, you bet. We have over 20 large vegetation management projects. A lot of them are shaded fuel breaks. I'll start in the north and work south. In Nevada, we have the Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break. It's a 60-mile, 200 to 300 foot wide shaded fuel break going around the entire community in the wildland urban interface. And as Jason mentioned, it's not to stop the fire, it's to change the fire behavior. In San Rafael, we have multiple smaller shaded fuel breaks right along the wildland urban interface boundary. We also have the San Rafael San Anselmo fuel reduction zone in the Mount Tamalpais Cemetery. And that is a large eucalyptus grove that we're really concerned about it throwing embers and immediate threat to the structures. In the Greater Ross Valley, we have the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, a 38-mile shaded fuel break along the wildland urban interface boundary again. And then in Southern Marin, we have at least 10 different shaded fuel break projects, all along Mill Valley, Tam Valley, and Homestead Valley. Marin City, we've done a significant amount of work in Marin City. If you drive up and down 101 in the Waldo grade, you see some of the work that's been going on along 101. And in West Marin, we've been doing a lot of evacuation route clearing.
So a lot happening in terms of large-scale vegetation management we're in. Again, we don't have to cut all the trees down. We don't have to make a big clear cut. But if you pull out the stuff that I'll say shouldn't be there, that's dead, dying, and whatnot, fire slows down. And these are strategically placed, I believe, right? So that it's designed to sort of insulate our built communities from the more wildland area, right?
Yeah, we're using a considerable amount of fire modeling. First of all, we're finding out where we have the most fires, and then we can identify those as hot spots where we need to do treatment. And then we're looking at how fire will move through that area. And one of them that we're using is called pathways analysis. And so we'll analyze where the fire wants to move with the greatest speed. And then we match that with our shaded fuel breaks and make sure that our shaded fuel breaks are aligned with those pathways. And we can also have what we call strategically placed large area treatments, where we can put them out into the open space, and that would interrupt one of those pathways. So this high energy fire, high speed fire turns into a low energy, low speed fire.
That sounds great. So we've got these big vegetation management projects. We've got prescribed burns, burn piles going on. We've got the home evaluation program, chipper program.
Chipper program is one of my favorite programs because it is engaging with our residents and supporting our residents. We had over 4,000 pickups last year, which was a 30% increase over the year prior. And we time it with our home evaluation program. So if you receive a home evaluation that says you need to do this type of work, you can click on right into your home report and request a sign up for chipper days. So that way when you do your work, you can just simply pile the material up on your street, and we'll come by and pick up the material. That's a $200 to $300 savings right there. Plus, it's decreasing the amount of vehicles that are driving to the compost location to drop it off.
Well, good strategy. So let's kind of go back to residents in homes and whatnot. Jason, is there anything we can do to prevent homes from burning?
Absolutely. And we've talked about the vegetation management. I think it's easy to look up at the hills and say that's the problem. But only 50% of Marin, and it's considerable, is protected open space lands, either federal, state, or local. The other is really residential neighborhoods and where the structures are. And where we need to focus our attention is on every single house in every backyard. And when we start to scale that, starts with a few homes, then goes to a neighborhood, then goes to a community, you can see the reach that you'd have. That is what is going to interrupt, the conflagration and the fear that we all have about fires spreading through communities and killing people. And it starts right in your backyard. It's that first 5 feet that is so critically important around the house, that you create a non-combustible zone. And then minor modifications, and they don't have to be super expensive, that you make to your home to make it more ember resistant. Everyone should be going to Fire Safe Marin's website. There are great videos, there's great information on steps you can take that aren't super expensive and have large impacts. And that's where we need to start and really drive it home tonight, is it starts right in your yard.
I heard some of the CAL FIRE chiefs after the fire in Los Angeles and other fires explaining this is really a partnership. It's not as if the government or the fire community or anybody else can just say, we'll take care of it all for you, you don't have to worry about it. Most of the land that ends up in the built environment being burned is privately owned, and it's not possible to come in and deal with that. So what we're hoping, besides all this work with the fuel breaks and whatnot, is that residents, in fact, are going to take action. So you talked about the first 5 feet, how important that is. What are some of the other things that people should be doing to make their homes more resistant to the embers that are in fact what burn most homes down?
Well, the first 5 feet, most important. One of the next ones is your vents, of whether it's your attic vents or your subfloor vents. Make sure that they're 1/8 inch or less, so that embers that are attacking your house, and that's what it is, they're embers attacking your house, can't get inside those vents. They will hit the 1/8 mesh and fall down to the ground, which is why Zone 0 is so important, so that when those embers hit your house and fall down to the ground, they don't start burning up to the sides of your house. Non-combustible siding, that can be a really expensive adaptation, which makes it even more important that we do Zone 0. But if you are going to be re-siding your house, it would be really good if you have non-combustible siding. Marin has had a Class A roof ordinance since the early 90s. A lot of the non-Class A roofs have been attrited out, but we still have quite a few non-Class A roofs. And so that's where an ember can land on the roof and catch that roof on fire. And then we just ask for what we call fire smart landscaping. We're not asking you to completely remove all vegetation out of your property. We're asking for separation both horizontally and vertically. So when an ember lands in your yard, even if it catches something on fire, it'll just stay with that localized plant instead of moving horizontally or going up into the canopy and then It's the canopy burning with those embers. That's what catches houses on fire.
How about gates and fences?
I was just
and
going to
things?
say.
Thank you
There
for
go.
catching that. Thank you.
That, think of this. Mark described the plants and the configuration. Think of it as a chain towards your house, and if you've got to interrupt that chain in order to stop that, and so combustible fences that we all have that butt up against our house, a side gate or a deck that there's no clearance, that is just part of the chain that leads fire right to your house. And once a fire ignites your house and we're stretched thin, there's almost no chance to save it. Or there is for one house, but not the other 7 around it. So interrupting that things like combustible fences that are adjacent to, or decks, or you name it, where fire can propagate from one thing to the next right up to your house is what we're trying to interrupt.
Yeah. So most Marin residents now have received a report, quite detailed, listing these types of actions in there. Got to open the report to find out what they are. But I think as has been pointed out more than once, it can seem intimidating. It can be a lot. So I think part of the strategy is a gradual plan. Start on that first 5 feet. That's kind of the most critical. And then can have a multi-year plan if that's what you need to do. Chip away at it a little bit at a time, make a big difference over time.
And if you're a contractor and you're wondering how you can participate, go to Fire Safe Marin, get the information. There are courses out there for contractors. If you're not sure if it's something that you're not, you can't do yourself. We encourage everybody, and this is a community event. It's not just our residents, it's also our contractors.
And our approach, we're calling it the house out approach. That's what Marin Wildfire and our member agencies are doing. We're starting with the built environment and working out from there. We're asking the resident to take that same approach. With that, you have that long list of items, and you're creating your strategy to mitigate those those resolutions. Start at the house and work out from there. And we've had people say, well, under 100-mile-an-hour winds, under 60-mile-an-hour winds, none of these actions are going to do any good, but that's actually not true. Milliman and CoreLogic, who are 2 powerful firms within the insurance industry, did some risk modeling, and if you start having the 25% level of community engagement, the resiliency of that neighborhood really starts to climb. Once we hit 50 to 75% of our community starting to take engagement, that's when we start seeing resiliency for our communities.
So really, if you think about it, in a built-out semi-urban environment, if all the homes had what we call fire smart landscaping, 5 feet cleared, the right fence, gutters, the proper windows, non-combustible siding, those homes just aren't going to burn, even if it's a really big fire.
And we don't start the urban conflagration.
Perfect.
And if you think about it, once one house is on fire, and then 2, and then 3, the amount of ember cast and the heat coming off of those homes just further propagates. And so you end up contributing to the problem rather than helping it, and it's hurting your whole community.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to talk a little bit about insurance. But if it's not us that's motivating you, I think that we can all expect in California we're going to be motivated by our insurance companies to make the changes necessary.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that, where we think insurance is going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's frightening, quite honestly. You look at the losses, the magnitude of losses, the liquidity that the FAIR plan has, and just in the LA fires alone. And the impacts that's going to have across the insurance industry. I think you're going to see the legislator and others have to take action to try to stabilize the market, but I think that is one piece of the puzzle. California residents are going to have to come to the table. We're going to have to create fire-adapted communities, doing all these things that we talked about in order to reduce the risk to these insurance companies, in order to keep them in California and keep our rates at a reasonable level.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where we're heading.
And in order for the insurance industry to re-engage in California, they're going to insist upon that their customers start taking action on their property, whether it's home hardening or in zone 0. And that is how I think we're going to be able to have that public-private partnership of us supporting our residents to get the work done on their property, and then it's the insurance industry saying, all right, if you guys do your good work, we're going to insure you.
Yeah. I think one fire code issue that might be coming down the line, a lot of talk about it, is a code that would require that the first 5 feet around the home, zone 0, in fact, be properly prepared. We're looking at that at some point maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, you have the Board of Forest's recent executive order from the governor's office moving forward with very high severity zones and an ordinance to follow. Local agencies are going to have to take action on that. And I think that you're going to see a lot of proactive approaches here with Zone 0 from local agencies that may not be covered under that executive order or a very high fire zone, but all of us recognizing that this should be a standard. These fires are not just in the very high or in the WUI. They are coming into more urban settings, and therefore, our codes and ordinances should be contemporary and reflect what we're seeing across the board. So I do believe that you're going to see ordinances coming forward here in Marin, and I suspect other parts of California. We can't be less restrictive than the state, but we can be more restrictive. And I think this is, again, it's not to torture people. It's because we need to stabilize our insurance market. We need to keep people safe. And most importantly, we need not have another fatality from a wildfire in California.
And let's support our elected officials who have to make these more difficult decisions. Everything will be in public hearings and whatnot. But when you hear that we're trying to come up with a code, that's to protect everybody. It may be inconvenient at first, but this is a little bit of an aesthetic change. Everybody will be doing it, and we'll all be a lot safer. So let's support them and make their jobs a little bit easier too. So let's take a few questions out here. We actually haven't gotten very many yet, so for those in the audience out there, feel free to bring in some of the questions. One of them is residents who have pools, 10,000 gallons of water, are there ways to let firefighters know that water is available for them? Does that make a difference?
So, we'll know from our helicopters and resources above us where water sources are, and even those helicopters will use those pools and other things at times. We have Google Earth images that are right on our tablet commands, which are in each vehicle. So, and we will use that water source. We have Honda pumps that can extract the water and be used. We're resourceful, and I think that there are quite a few pools, and we have access to images that'll show us.
Yeah, so basically feel reassured that firefighters understand the terrain, know it's available out there. They're out there working in these environments. They're not going to miss a pool if it's out there and it can help them.
But if I can add on to that, a lot of pool areas are gated and fenced, and sometimes those gates are locked. And so we want to be able to open up, and we'll find a way through that lock, but it would be better if we didn't have to find a way through a locked gate to get to a pool.
Yeah, sounds good. Another one, is there any information about how the fires in LA started? I know that's always complicated, it takes time to investigate, probably a little premature for that, but any thoughts that you want to share, or is it just kind of what we typically see?
I really try to not pay attention to that until the final report, because I've heard about 6 or 7 different theories, and I bet you they're all wrong.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. Give it time to, it happens. So we've talked a lot about the importance of having defensible space. We have the home evaluation program out there. What is being done when people are not creating defensible space and in fact creating a big problem for their neighbors out there?
Well, it depends. It goes from community to community to community. The agency having jurisdiction has the authority to enforce the codes and ordinances. San Rafael at this time is the only community within Marin County that is issuing citations. And we're going to see how effective that is in creating compliance across the communities. Throughout the state, communities that have done citations haven't seen a large increase in citations. There's lots of reasons for that. For the rest of our member agencies, we've been taking the public education approach, and I want to tie it back to insurance. So I think insurance may be one of the biggest tools for us to get compliance.
Just to add to that, as Mark was mentioning, there's a lot of people that are doing things that sometimes they just don't know. And so, within the Office of Emergency Management, in partnership with a lot of the agencies, it's all about community. and making sure that you know your neighbor, start talking to your neighbor. And yes, there might be those difficult conversations that might happen, but sometimes people just don't know that the eucalyptus tree is hazardous. And sometimes having that neighbor-to-neighbor contact and saying, you know, I'm doing this on my property and here's why. And hopefully that turns into the change throughout the community to say, you know what, I didn't know that that was a hazardous, hazardous brush. That way you can slowly start seeing change throughout a community. And maybe that one hazardous house now is no longer the hazardous house because you see all of the change that's happening in the community. And so that's where all of the partner agencies working together take that same mindset into the community, neighbors talking to neighbors, but also when it comes down to evacuations, the more that you know your neighbors, the better that you can start having a plan that works for everyone.
When I'd say 9 out of 10 times when we get a complaint from a neighbor, you know, we go out to the house and that individual that complained has some issues to work on too. So I think it's the approach needs to be that we're all in this together. The other piece is we all have the ability to do abatements, forced abatements. The amount of staff time it takes to get through that, and then the court order, and ultimately, you know, going and doing the abatement takes away from our ability to educate, 10 to 1, 50 to 1, the people that are really trying to make a difference. So that complicates things, but we all do have the ability to go to forced abatement for non-compliant.
And Rich, if I could add a couple things to help increase whether you call it compliance or people taking action. Firewise communities is a really good way, and Firewise communities through the National Fire Protection Association, and it's a certification for your community that says that you've done this amount of work, that you've done this amount of budget education, and that you've come together. And to me, what we find is that at the peer pressure of our neighbors working together, when they see me taking action on my property, then my neighbor tends to take action. That's one. Two, we've been doing a little bit of research on why people are taking action. And you'd be surprised about how many people are taking action because it's the right thing to do for their community. And so we just need to get them to know it's the right thing to do. And with our inspections, we find that if the resident walks with our inspector, they are far more likely to take action. So we ask our residents take advantage of the opportunity to walk around the house with the inspector.
Yeah. Good pitch for the Firewise program. If you're not sure, you can go to the Fire Safe Marin website. You can find out if you're in a Firewise site or not. If you're not, you want to start one, reach out to us. We'll help you do that.
Yeah.
It's a great program. And it's a neighbor helping neighbor, which is really the key to all of this. I think. Another question, person's asking about vents. Is there a type of vent? And I don't think it's a brand as much, but what type of vent would you recommend that people put on their homes?
At a minimum, we would like 1/8 inch mesh, and you can get some where it's just a band of mesh that you can staple over the usually circular vents that are up in your attic or the rectangular vents at your subfloor. But you also can get inserts that go in. Those are great. And then the ultimate is there's vents that you can put in that when they sense heat, there's actually a chemical formation that stops all airflow and air movement through that vent, so no embers will get through.
Yeah, there's quite a few manufacturers out there. They're all very good. They have to be certified and whatnot, so you have multiple choices, but those are the basic options that are out there. Let's see. One concern is how big of a threat is the fire community seeing lithium batteries these days?
You know, I think I heard somewhere that the largest hazmat post-fire is happening in Los Angeles right now, and I think that, this is a new and emerging challenge for us. When we have, if we said take one car, well, take the car with the battery would be my recommendation, but make sure it's charged. And I think it presents new challenges for all of us, and we're still working with that in the industry on how we, mitigate those.
Yeah. It is new, something we're dealing with out there. Is there any kind of paint that you could just put on your deck and then I don't have to worry it's not going to burn up?
There are treatments that you can buy. There is a new fire retardant paint that hasn't gotten any United States approvals, but it's actually approved for use in Australia. So we've been tracking that to see if it gets United States approval, to see if it's effective. We've seen some demos where it does look to be beneficial. It would basically make a wood siding act like stucco siding. How long that will last, we don't know. When it comes to treatment of your deck and or vegetation, there are spray-on applications that you can do that have shown some efficacy, but it's a once-a-year type application.
Yeah. So I would imagine the paints would be more for the siding of a house. You put it on a deck, it's not really designed to be walked on and whatnot. And
Right.
I think the important thing for decks is take advantage of that 5-foot strategy. Make sure there's nothing stored underneath it. You ought to be able to basically sort of ember-proof your deck without having to remove it and paint it. Paint is really not, at this point, something that we could recommend as an absolute strategy.
Correct. But if you take the zone zero strategy, then the combustibility of your siding becomes much less important. And zone zero is one of the spots where we're having the hardest time to get people to comply. But the fact of the matter is it's one of the cheapest ones you can do. It doesn't take a lot of money to create zone zero.
Yeah. We have a question about PG&E, and let's face it, they're not always getting the best reputation these days. You guys jump in here, but I'm just going to tell you my own experience with PG&E has actually been pretty positive. In my own property, every 2 years they come through, they walk all the lines out there. There's clearances which they're required to create around lines and whatnot. They've been doing that. They do put a lot of grants out there. Fire Safe Marin has been acting with those. They've been helpful. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like they really are trying to partner with everybody and make it work.
I've recently seen commercials with PG&E and talking to residents, and they are forward-leaning. And I think they've got an infrastructure in place that existed for a long time, and they are making real efforts to try to harden that infrastructure, make it more fire resilient. And they're working with all of us. They've got public safety reps. Recently PG&E committed a helicopter to the North Bay that we host for firefighting efforts. So they really are partnering with us and trying to harden their system and make it safer. And
they're a key partner. When we activate the Emergency Operations Center, they're a key partner in the communication, and they have a seat at the table, and they will help flow information from the field up to the decision makers so that we know what's going on their end, and then we can help make these critical decisions to help, navigate through whatever disaster we're dealing with. But as Chief Weber said, they have a liaison now that is meeting with all the police chiefs, fire chiefs, showing up at our meetings, and also providing great training to our first responders out in the field. So they are making some good changes, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Speaking of communication, Stephen talked about all the great systems we have to get alert and warning out. I'm going to make a little pitch for KCBS Radio, Channel 740 News. They take all of this very seriously. They have been supporting the wildfire prevention effort for a long time, working closely with Fire Safe Marin and public agencies. And they also will be broadcasting information that you can trust has been vetted. So it's the correct information. They work closely with Office of Emergency Management. So I'll make a little pitch for, if nothing else, you can always turn into them and you'll get kind of get the latest in the news feed that's out there. All right, so with that said, we kind of wrapped up most of the questions. If I didn't get to some of the questions, we will put the answer to those on our website, so you can see those in a few days that are out there. As we're kind of wrapping up here, maybe if I could ask each of you, I'll start with you, Rick, if there's one message that you would like to leave our audience with.
Yes, preparedness is vital to your survival. And we ask that all of you, one, sign up for Alert Marin, have those critical notifications at your fingertips so that you know when to evacuate, where to go. Also, have a plan. Communicate with your family members and know this is my evacuation route, and have an alternative route if it's available. Have a go bag. Be prepared. Have this in your forefront. And I don't know if this is time for me to talk about some preparedness that we have, or do you want me to wait until the end?
Go for it.
So Chief Weber and others at this table have talked about our collaboration and our partnership and being prepared so that we can provide the best public safety to our community members. We have a evacuation drill going on in Southern Marin. We are taking the lead in Mill Valley, but it is truly a partnership and in collaboration with Marin Wildland Fire Protection Authority, Office of Emergency Management, Marin County Fire, Southern Marin Fire, California Highway Patrol, CHP, our CERTs, our Emergency Preparedness Commission. We are all coming to the table so that we can run a drill that is not only beneficial to us in public safety, but also our community members, so that they have muscle memory. When they run an evacuation, they know where they're going. In our Google study, we realized that we have an additional evacuation path, which we call the Hamilton shortcut, that we're going to drill on April 26th. And that is a key piece to getting people out of the threat zone, out of the canyon, and onto a major thoroughfare to get out of the disaster area.
Great. Let's get a lot of participation for that. That's how we
Absolutely. I
work
want
with
to
it.
encourage our communities to get out there, community members to get out there and participate with us so that they know what to expect when we have to activate an evacuation.
Great. Good work there in Mill Valley. Mark?
I would just like to say that the strength of our communities is in some of its parts. And if everybody does their part, then the resiliency and the strengths of our community is going to go up dramatically. Remember those numbers I talked to you about. If 25% of our homes start getting their work done, we see a modest climb in the resiliency. But once we hit 50 to 80% of our structures or residents taking action, our resiliency goes way up. So please take action. And then I wanted to mention that we have about $2.55 million this fiscal year put towards home hardening, defensible space grants, direct assistance for those who don't have the financial resources due to work themselves. We're putting the contractors on the property, and then voluntary abatements. So we're making a tremendous investment into our residents. And what we're finding with our grant program, though, for every dollar that Marin Wildfire is putting towards the resident, they're putting $6 or $7. So we see that as a return on our investment.
And how do residents access that?
They can go to Marin Wildfire, click on resident info, and go to the grants tab.
Great. Super. Stephen?
So I'll take two quick things. Number one, we're always talking about getting information out, but we want to make sure that people are going to trusted information. Make sure that you follow your local agencies on social media. Make sure you're signing up for Alert Marin. That's how you get access to that trusted and verified information. So when it hits KCBS, when it hits you on your text message, you know exactly if an agency is saying evacuate, you can believe that message when it gets to you. In addition to that, we want to make sure that everything that you've heard today, it sounds like a lot. However, we know that all hazards planning is the best way to do this. Whether you're talking about evacuations for wildfires or earthquakes or any other type of emergency, use this as one tool to be able to say, I can do all hazards planning when it comes to disaster response. You don't have to have a unique plan for every single thing. Take this wildfire plan, take your tsunami plan. All of these things all work together, and so it's an easy process. It's just a matter of getting it started, but also getting that trusted information.
Good advice, Stephen. Thank you. Jason?
I think you heard it. This is about a partnership tonight. We need everybody to do their part and focus on your home out. We as public agencies are all working very closely together. Take the few minutes to go visit Fire Safe Marin's website. I think you will learn an enormous amount. This can seem overwhelming when you get that report or you try to figure out what to do. It can be taken in small chunks. We're here to help you. We're here to support you. When we all do this together, we're going to make Marin a safer place and more resilient.
I love that. Sort of, if I were to leave my closing remarks, it really would be this idea that we, in fact, can protect our homes. There's action we can take. You've heard about it. We're all in this together. It makes a difference. I'll make one last time the pitch for the Fire Safe Marin, both website and YouTube channel. And if you're still not sure and you have questions, just write us an email. We'll get back to you right away. We're happy to respond to anything you need to do, that you need to know about how to protect your home. But the fact is, if we all work together, we can be very safe here in Marin County. So with that, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to our guests. Really appreciate all of you coming. Just wonderful to hear all the advice and whatnot that you've given everybody. And so once again, thanks to the audience for staying out here. Good night now.